Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We have another amazing guest for you today. We have with us Trent Smock. Trent is a behavioral coaching expert with over 25 years of experience guiding executives in billion-dollar companies. With a background rooted in a psychology degree, as well as firsthand experience as both an athlete and an entrepreneur, he brings a unique perspective to effective leadership. His work centers on helping leaders simplify complex challenges and emphasizes the power of influence over authority. Trent, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we're definitely happy to have you here. We're going to dive right into it. However, as is customary on the show, we do have an icebreaker. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
Well, that's a good question. I spent a lot of time watching cartoons when I was growing up. Probably the Roadrunner. I don't know why. I don't know what that says about me psychologically, but I would say the Roadrunner.
I mean, I like
Always
that.
on the move.
Always on the move. There you
Yeah.
go. Like that one. And just before we dive into some more of this, what is procrastination to you? How do you define it? And what does it mean to you personally?
Well, it's interesting you asked that because I just watched or listened recently to your procrastination playbook video, and that's a great question. And I took some notes listening to you just explain it. I'm a procrastinator myself. I have very low patience. And I think I agree with some things that you said. The other ones I rationalized. So the avoidance, I guess procrastination is not doing what you say you want to do, but you don't do it for whatever reason. And I think it's part of life. I think it's part of life. As a sole proprietor who's 30 years, I'm always out of a job. And that level, when I say stress, I don't mean it that way. However, it certainly can be stressful. You always have something to do that keeps you busy. So I tend to go to the shiny thing that's immediate in front of me instead of, like, for example, I just printed out something that's a worksheet that I use for folks in terms of managing their day. I take a stab at that and then I don't follow. However, in my business right now, I need to be more consistent with my emails and the contribution that I provide to my clients. So I don't know if that's a definition. I think it's more of an experience that I just gave you.
Well, it's definitely valid. I mean, everybody experiences it differently. And I mean,
Yeah.
what is a definition, right? I mean, a
Yeah.
definition is just something that we stick to the wall, just for the sake of having it, right? But I mean, everybody's perspective is different. It's just
Yeah.
why we
And
ask the question on the show.
well, and we rationalize, we can talk ourselves into or out of anything. So, yeah, I find what you're doing fascinating because a lot of what we do in coaching is basically helping people think differently, which is some of the things that you have talked about.
No, you're certainly right in that. And we're always learning, always evolving. I think if we remain curious, we'll come to the bottom of something eventually. Speaking of coming to the bottom of it, why don't you give a little bit about your background? Certainly sounds really interesting. Your journey, sort of how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. So grew up in Indiana, basketball country, a small town, 40,000 people, directly east of Indianapolis on the Ohio border. Sister, who was 8 years older, older brother, 3 or 4 years older than me. He was an athlete growing up, and just from the beginning. And so I was following, in his footsteps. So he played basketball. I played football. I didn't put me to the Naval Academy actually to play football. So grew up in that sports environment. Was very fortunate to have a lot of athletic ability. Played 3 sports, in high school, I should say, when I was young. And then went to Indiana, played football and basketball there, had a fair amount of success. And then got drafted actually by the Lions. I got cut, went overseas and played basketball, trying to avoid work as long as I could. And then after 3 or 4 years, came out to Arizona, where I am now. My brother was here. He had moved here. He was an attorney and stayed with his wife, probably telling you too much, for a few years, but basically got a job selling dictation equipment. What do you do with a psychology degree, right, if you're not getting a doctorate? So did that for a few years, learned how to sell, worked for a franchisor of computer stores, ended up being and helped those people who bought the franchise get going, ended up being involved in the international component of that, setting up distribution channels overseas. So traveled quite a bit in Europe, Had a chance to literally go around the world once. Then went to work for another international company setting up distribution for laser printers. That then the computer industry was getting high tech, was getting started. So worked in a handful of startup companies, which is kind of the behavioral profile of mine, independent, self-reliant, and 5 or 6 companies. Sold a couple, but as I like to say, not very many zeros at the end of those checks. And a long way around the barn, managed a small company in Phoenix that was actually a huge pool builder, but they had a manufacturing company that they call in-floor cleaners. The 3 manufacturers are all here in Phoenix worldwide. What those do, when you build a pool, you put them in the pool when you build on the bottom, and they pop up and they squirt water around that cleans the pool. That's where I got introduced to the psychometric surveys and behavioral surveys. I was the president and senior vice president, for a $3 or $4 million company. Got exposed to that, really liked it, and ended up just buying a license. Said, hey, I can do this. I can sell this stuff. I took a flyer. I was fairly well, because of the computer industry, networked within the industry, places at least I could go. Hung up my shingle and just started. One of my first clients was AIG Insurance Company. There was a guy that was a younger kid and wanted to be a professional golfer. He gave me that account. And so I took that and then because of how I did, the executives introduced me to Pacific Life. I got Prudential over the years and a handful of other insurance companies. And that kind of got me going, sustained, and then started creating my own programs, my own coaching program, my own sales process. That's a long story around the barn, but finally using my psychology. So what I'm doing now, I'm still have those companies still working, using the psychometric survey. We relicense that. We train executives on how to read the results visually on a graph, and then how to integrate that into their decision-making within the organization, whether that be certainly hiring, coaching, ongoing development, behavioral change, culture, conflict, et cetera, et cetera. And as a sideline, not a sideline, but as an outgrowth of that, I have created a program called Coach You First, coming out of watching many, many sales managers tell people what to do, not teach them how to do something. So that whole premise of Coach You First is about helping people, giving them a system and a process to identify their problems, identify their barriers, and craft simple solutions to solve those problems. And fortunately, I've been able to license those to some of those big clients that I've had. So that's where I am today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what an interesting sort of journey, right? I mean, you started out in the U.S., you played overseas for a bit, you came back from pool equipment to psychometric tests.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely interesting. But what do you think was your biggest challenge that you had to overcome in that journey?
Well, I wouldn't call it a challenge. There was a question in church recently, and they said, how would you describe your life? Or I'm not sure exactly what the question was, but it makes me think a lot of my life has been providing and surviving. If you're, 30 years, more than half my life, or not more than half my life, but, trying to build a business, trying to create products, trying to convince people, selling, servicing, creating new products, paying the bills, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I've more survived than anything else. But that's the challenge, which is the creativity, the resourcefulness, the keeping my confidence. Sometimes as a sole proprietor, you're really smart, and sometimes you're not so smart. So I don't know if that answers your question, Chris, but.
No. I definitely appreciate that. And I mean, it's something that every small business owner goes through, and everybody's gone through those similar cycles for sure. When did you know that you were on the right path? I love this question. When did you know that you were on the right path, that you were doing something that was meaningful to you, and that you were doing what was right for you?
Well, there was an inflection point in my business. Fortunately, my clients, AIG and Pacific Life, are big companies, right? And, I was able to get in through a high-level referral, so I didn't really have to go through HR, which I don't typically do. But there was an inflection point where I learned that it was better to create raving fans, that term then. I didn't understand that at the time, but to service people and, in a way that they would never question if they had to write a check, right? I mean, over promise, under promise, over deliver. Well, and I kept trying to do that and do that. And of course, maybe make my way around. But there came a point, the national sales manager, I was doing, I don't know, a small amount of work. But the national sales manager, who I knew, of course, was getting ready to promote some wholesalers to management. And he called me and said, "Hey, Trent, can you help me make some decisions with the survey and give me some insight on some of those people that I want to promote?" And that was an inflection point, because it's not just about getting paid. It's about being respected, valued, and utilized. And they don't give you more money if they're not using you, which I've learned over time. But that was really an inflection point for me. So my not motto changed, but the way that I approached people was not so much as what can you do for me, but what can I do for you? And karma comes around. And so I've had that probably for the last 15 or 20 years. It's just, I'm just trying to help people. That's pretty much it. Now, it costs you money, but I mean, so that was an inflection point.
And I love that you touch on that too, because it's something that's coming more around, in terms of networking, in terms of business in general. The golden rule, do unto others as they would have do unto you. But, now we're talking more, and again, I got this from my training in American Income Life when I was back in the day in insurance. Back in the day, it wasn't that long ago. They live by the platinum, which is do more for others than you would have them do for you. And that really did stand out to me as, a way that we can move towards, a society that is, I guess, not as egocentrical, but, like Zig Ziglar also said, right? You help enough people get what they want, you can get what you want.
Yeah, sure.
That's one of the ones I fell back on for sure.
Yeah, no, I love him. He just sent out a video of him. I don't know if you've ever seen the video where a woman came to him complaining about her job, and then he talked to her after that. I love that. Love that. Chris, the other thing is that when salespeople are out meeting people, prospecting, etc., their mindset is about what they can get. Instead of, I have a product and a service, do you mind if I share that with you to see if it's something that fits for you? If it does, great. If it doesn't, or it's a not now response, that's fine. Would you mind if I stay in touch with you? I mean, it's easy for me to say, when you're 25 trying to make a living, it's probably a little bit different. Yeah, no, I'm certainly embraced that kind of mentality, as I've gotten more experienced, I guess.
And just to swing it back to your coaching program, you said coach you first. Can you give a little bit more detail on how, what does that look like?
Well, the coach you first roadmap is there's 9 steps, but there are 4 primary steps. And when we do this, it's an online program with personal coaching, but it's self-directed. And the first 3 steps are to help you identify what your problems are. And we use an exercise. We have what we call a reference guide that walks you through the exercises, and then what I call an idea board to identify all the problems that you have. Typically it's, if we're doing it with a company, it would be business-based. And then from that, so you identify all your problems, but we also teach that we need to focus on the real problem, not the symptom. Bad marriage is not the problem. That's a symptom. Low sales is not the problem. Procrastination is not the problem, right? It's a symptom of who knows what. So, a little bit more difficult to get on procrastination, but in sales or it's an easy one, not making enough calls, that might be the problem. But the real issue is, why aren't you making those calls, right? So we need to get to the root cause of that issue. 5 whys, if you will. So that's the first step. And so they go through an exercise where they idea board everything, prioritize the 3, put them on there, choose just one. Because what I'm trying to do is get people to learn a system and a process, right? That's repetitive. So identify your problems. Okay, well, what's stopping you? 9 times out of 10, it's not the first time you've had this issue. So that's typically a personal barrier. Same thing. Go through the exercise, idea board them, choose the ones, put them on there. And then prioritize out of the 3. You have to prioritize so that you're going through the recipe. I call it a success recipe. And then the solutions, the same thing. Idea board all your solutions, prioritize. I got to be actionable. prioritize them, and put them on that list with an action date. So it's a quick look at solving problems. We actually ask people to do that on the very first interaction online with us. I want them to start thinking. And so that's the get out of the chute. Let's get going. Let's not procrastinate. And then there's 5 other resources that help those people overcome barriers. The behavioral profiling is one of them. What's it costing you to do it? Building your critical connections, etc. So there's other resources that are available when people are blocked. So with that said, Chris, what we're teaching a simple process to identify your problems by breaking your barriers, right? But what we're really doing is getting people to think different. And there's 4 rhythms there: thinking about your thinking, your internal narrative, which I'm sure you come across all the time. Bad story, bad outcome, and patterns that don't serve us. We're animals. We get up, we do the same thing every day, and breaking that pattern, this up. And then what we hope will come out of that is creating new beliefs and behavior, because you don't change unless you believe in something. At least that's my experience. So long answer to coach you first, but it's a very simple program. Difficult to, and you can experience, you understand this, more difficult to apply and execute.
No, I definitely like that. The coaching you first. I'm curious, in your experience, in dealing with these businesses in different departments, is it more often like what you were saying before? Is it more often on a personal level, or is it more often on a process level?
Well, what do you mean by process?
But by the process level, I mean you go into a sales company and you say they're not making enough phone calls. Well, okay, so why aren't you making enough phone calls? Is it that your salespeople need more training, or is it more that you don't have the tools in place that they need? Like maybe, I don't know, just going off the top of my head here, like a auto dialer, or maybe they don't have a script, or maybe they don't have a list, or maybe they don't have a follow up system.
Yeah.
Do you find it's more about the training, like personal or beliefs, or is it more on the actual systemic side?
I could give a rat's behind about the process in that vernacular, what resources you have or you don't have, because it doesn't really matter. You can't do anything about it. Now, do they need some things structurally? Sure. But large organizations have all that stuff. What we're doing with these other 2 insurance companies that we've licensed this to is we're training the managers to think differently, to coach differently, to help people uncover for themselves what they need to do. My kids growing up would always say when they're little, I don't know. I don't know is not an answer. I'm scared to death because of COVID. Okay, well, what are your options here? Stay inside for 7 years, so now younger people today, sometimes at any point in time, they just haven't had those life experiences. But what we're trying to do is we're just training the manager, and then, with all the tools and the resources, and it's their responsibility then to teach them. My responsibility to help them think differently too, right? Because they're a young manager. They haven't crossed the chasm from an individual contributor. Well, they have, but actually they have. They've gone from an individual contributor in a general sense to where they're managing maybe 9, 10 people, but they didn't go to how to manage people. And they got a boss going, hey, how much did you sell? How many calls? So there's a lot of nuances that kind of my argument when they hit me with some reality. I go, okay, well, so you got 2 options. You can tell them what to do, or you can start to plant that seed where they become self-reliant. So not so much about the tools and the resources.
And I'm curious in your experience too. I mean, again, there's all spectrum of the rainbow. There's all, colors, there's polka dots, there's stripes, there's, many different reasons. Is there an underlying theme in most of those transition, specifically the transition people from, individual contributor to managing individual contributors? Is there any common theme in the barriers that they experience that they need to overcome?
Yes, it's called humility. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just that they have, I mean, think about when you were 20 or 30. I mean, at least me, I wasn't the most aware guy in the world. Pretty focused on myself. And so you don't know. No one's taught you how to be a coach, how to be a leader, how to inspire other people, how to engage other people. I call that crossing the chasm. I know there's a book out there somewhere like that, but is that they are still, generally speaking, 30-year-old managers, whatever the number is, are still telling people what to do. And they just don't understand or haven't experienced that that's an ineffective way to lead. It's time consuming. They follow up with people. I never follow up with anybody. It's not my job. I don't want to hold you accountable. You hold yourself accountable to what we agreed that you were going to do. So you're either in or you're out. Now, that's a little Pollyannish, of course, but at some point you have to say you're responsible for your own success, not me. So I've learned in my experience with these big corporations, I can give you the tools, the resources, and the methodologies to do something. I can't make you do it. And if management doesn't make you do it, sometimes you got to have a little bit of a stick. So there's a balance there, but that good leaders, great leaders, don't do their work, don't do people's work. They don't track them down to say, did you make your bed? They have an approach and a mindset and a heart where they're making other people powerful. And that's my approach, right? To help people help other people.
Right. So I'm going to maybe bludgeon this a little bit and butcher it a little bit, but bear.
Well, I thought you were going to bludgeon me. I was going to say, okay, fine, go ahead.
No. I might butcher the idea, but this is what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah, that's fine.
You were talking about influence, and what you were saying there too is, you don't go check up on people, and the good old analogy is carrot and stick, and sometimes you need more carrot and sometimes you need more stick, but then it's more beneficial. I would equate empowering your team to be more like the carrot then.
Well, so here's a simple exercise. So I'm coaching you, and I've got 10 of you, and we sit down, we have a conversation about not so much about your performance, but about how I work, how we're going to work together, how I can help you. And here's, when you go through all those conversations, might take a number of them, but there comes a point where you are responsible for doing certain things in a certain time and having a quality of that. Are you cool with it? Yeah, I'm good. Okay. All right. So here's some due dates. Here's what we're going to be checking up on, et cetera, et cetera. And so human nature is, you got 10 people, 3 or 4 people they're all over it. There's 3 or 4 people that they're not even close. You got that middle 60. So then it becomes, well, let me give you a contrast. A lot of managers, they wait. Chris, come on, man. Need to pick it up. Okay. So that goes on for a while, and then it's too late, right? So you've experienced that. But the conversation that needs to be had is the day you don't make your bed. That's when the conversation needs to start. Reasonably speaking, it could be a week or 2 or 3 or whatever it is. But it's like, this is what we talked about, Chris. These are the expectations for this role. Do you understand, et cetera, et cetera. And so ultimately, it's a very clearly defined measurement. Some intangibles, of course, but my view is, Chris, based on our conversation, you get it and you go, yeah. Okay, well, next month, we're going to have this conversation. You don't really live up to that. Then my question to you, Chris, is, are you in or you out? Probably rephrase that from HR, but eventually, hire slow, fire fast. That's my philosophy. Hire slow, fire fast. Not that you blow people out, but it's just, I need people who are going to show up for practice. I made a comment. And this is probably a touchy subject. Saw something on LinkedIn and it says, we trust our people so they can work from home. Okay, fine. Well, there's different views on that, right? But the way that it was said, it seemed like, well, I'm a better person because I trust people. And I thought to myself, well, okay, well, I get it. But if you were a coach of a sports team, would you let everybody work out on their own and just show up on game day? So anyway, that's a different subject. I digress. But that's how I handle it. Does it work all the time? Some people step up, some people don't, but but we know very quickly within 30 to 60 days if we made the right hire. And then there's an opportunity. I'm doing this with another company right now, is we're evaluating the 16 top executives and say, okay, well, we're probably all keepers, might need to put other people on the bus in different places. But how do we leverage those strengths based on their behaviors and skill sets?
Right.
Probably giving you too much answers here, but too many.
No. It's great. It's great information. And, I want to touch on that when you said, that the hires was hire slow, fire fast. But you also said that when you have somebody, and correct me here if I'm wrong again, you don't necessarily toss somebody off the team if, they're not a good forward. You may see that maybe they'd work better as defense.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not like you're tossing them out.
No,
Really,
no. You're not blowing people out just for the sake of, hey, you didn't pick up the trash or something like that, But it is for me, in my experience, it's a cultural environment, right? We want to create a culture of integrity, high performance, and likability, and respect, and discipline, and getting your job done. That's who I want on my team. Now, do you get every player to do that every day and in every game? Of course not. But you certainly don't get it if you don't have the expectations. So here's the deal. Coach you first. You are responsible for your success, not me. I'll give you the tools and the resources and coach you. But you got to do the work. And I make that very clear to my clients, probably a little more tactfully than this, but.
well, that's, there's something to be said about that. That's neither here nor there. But, it's almost as if, you want to empower people. You have these expectations set out. But again, to what extent, because you said the managers, you're getting the managers to think differently. But that has to be that there has to be some sort of trickle down effect as well, right? Because there's a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with this. There's a lot of people that go into work, and they're there to be a cog in the machine, and they're there to punch in, punch out, right? So from a managerial perspective, are you more empowering them to be accountable to what they're doing, or are you constantly promoting growth as well?
Well, to answer that question, and then I'll add some to it. There are people like that, and that's okay. Everybody doesn't have to be a superstar, right? And I could tell you a story about it, but it would be a sidetrack. But that's fine as long as they're doing the metrics. If they are metric based, right? Basically, to answer that, Chris, we're giving people a chance. We're giving them a system and a process if they want to improve themselves, right? And it's that simple 3-step process of identifying what your challenges are or opportunities. You can call it whatever you want to call it. It's nicer to call it an opportunity, but some might be problems, procrastination, and then how to fix that, how to take a stab yourself at solving your own problem and then get some help, right, from other people. So it's not a linear, you're in, you're out, 2:30 on Friday, you're gone. It's trying to inspire people who are ambitious or want more, or even to survive, if you will, or to maintain order in a nice, comfortable role and responsibility, to at least maximize that opportunity. But what new managers tend to do, myself included, is we want to help everybody, right? We want everybody to jump high. Some people can't jump high. Never going to happen. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. Doesn't mean that they're not redeployable, or they might just be particularly from a behavioral perspective, which we use all the time. A lot of times people are not in the right role. They're not aligned. And so they're swimming uphill. People who are detail oriented and patient and perfectionist, they're not salespeople, right? So we kind of incorporate that too, so that we can manage kind of expectations and try to leverage the behavioral strengths that they do have.
One of the biggest things, I think, is that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And that's kind of what, that's kind of where you come in, Trent, with your system, right? Because the biggest thing, like, especially for, I've had this experience myself as a new manager. Again, it's like, oh, well, I don't know what I don't know. For anybody listening, just what would be some steps that they could do to sort of help, I guess, raise that awareness, right? Because it's not again, you said it's not linear, right? what would be a way that they could actually start to have that kind of awareness? Are there any set questions or any set points they could
Well,
focus?
there's actually, I have an exercise. What did you learn about you as a result of reviewing the behavioral profile? But I don't know if it's still there. But the so first of all is there's a couple things, not necessarily in order. You have to be aware of your thoughts, of course, right? Right, and looking at your assets, right? What am I good at, right? So that's a list. Instead of saying what are your weaknesses, I like to say, well, what could you do even better, right? How would you describe yourself to other people, right? What are some of the things that you could do what could you start, stop, or do more of that would improve your relationships, your health, etc. Right? And I have something I call your future self, which is part of one of those exercises. And then, so you can go through 3 or 4 of those things, or the 3. But what's really critical, Chris, is that you're telling yourself the truth, right? Because just because you believe it doesn't make it true. So, and we're all hopefully have some of that in our life. And then the other exercises, okay, well, what am I going to do differently with what I learned? Now that's a hodgepodge. There's a lot of stuff in there. So you can't make 20 things and then you're going to do it because it's not going to happen. But you could choose something. I could pick something. I don't care what you pick. Just pick something, and you may use some of this. Just do something different, right? Consistently. In fact, there's a book, Tiny Habits, if you've heard that one. Is it Sean Archer? And, his analogy is just, floss 1 tooth a day. Just start with 1 tooth. So I get a little bit sidetracked here with that you really do have to get people to think different. I mean, that's the business you're in, right? To think different and change their beliefs and change their habits.
No, I really like that. Definitely changing the beliefs and actually, I think what you were going back there is that behavioral experimentation. If you don't like the outcome of something, you pick something to do differently and see how that changes the outcome, right?
Well, it's not so much the outcome as it is to the decision for me, because how you get the outcome, if you get the outcome you want, then it worked for you, right? It's the rationalization that we all make, right? That I'm right. And what we do, I mean, basically in the procrastination is rationalization, right? In that context. And we all do it. But, I had a coach for about 8 years. The guy was great. And I always thought, hey, if I'm coaching other people, I should have a coach myself, right? And I learned a lot of things from him, but it's really just about what we believe, right? But our decisions best for us and and your family, right? Because we all do things that, I don't want to say they're selfish. We do things because we want to, and it's okay. And it's not going to hurt anybody, but sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do for the good of maybe our health or our family, or it's the right thing to do. Easier said than done. So anyway.
No, that's definitely very true. Trent, this has been a really great conversation, really interesting. We are coming up pretty close to the time.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask you, was there anything that you feel that I should have asked but didn't ask, or anything that we didn't touch on that maybe we should have touched on today?
No, I appreciate the chance to ramble and, talk about my business and what we're doing. If I may, I have this quick look at solving problems as a download. I've got to put that up. So there's a link, but if you're interested in that, if you'll give me a day or two, I'll send it to you and you can, offer it to your folks and take a look at it first if you want. But it is, it's a self-directed exercise. The process that I talked about today and the 4 rhythms of coach you first, thinking about your thinking, et cetera. But it's a tangible takeaway that people might be able to leverage.
Okay, well, definitely. And then, to all our listeners, you will be able to find that in the show notes. We'll come back and we'll update the show notes when that's available. And just before we go, Trent, what is the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you in case they want to learn more about, Coach You First?
Well, the The best way, two ways, is just go to our website, coachyoufirst.com. That's in process, always updated. But yeah, that would be the best way. Or send me an email directly. My company is People First. So Trent Smock at peoplefirst.co, not .com. So those would be two ways to, or Google me, I've got, I don't know, my name comes up. So Google Trent Smock. But hopefully they'll check out the link that I'll send you. And my phone number, I'm happy to speak to people, answer any questions that they might have too.
Excellent. And just to all our listeners, don't worry, we will be putting that in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about, scrambling for a paper or pen or anything like that. Trent, it's been great. You have a lot of great insights. Thank you again so much for being on the show. To all our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that, motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just try and go out and be that motivation, inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity. Have a great day.